Picture this: a quiet night shattered by flashing emergency lights outside our window at 2 a.m., my 73-year-old grandpa calmly sipping chamomile tea while chaos unfolds by our fence. Worse than a nosy neighbor? An HOA run by a power-hungry Karen and her wannabe cop sidekick who thinks he's above the law. If you've ever tangled with an overzealous HOA, this tale of my grandpa's electrifying comeback will leave you grinning. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? You won't believe how we turned HOA tyranny into a neighborhood legend. 6 months ago, I was a single mom clawing my way back from a messy divorce. With my bank account in tatters, I moved with my 12-year-old son, Ethan, into my grandfather Henry Sullivan's cozy but dated home in Cedar Ridge Estates, Fox Ridge, Oregon. Henry, a sharp-witted retired electrical engineer, had a sprawling backyard perfect for Ethan's science projects and a mortgage-free house that gave my freelance writing career room to breathe. I thought we'd found our haven. I didn't know Cedar Ridge was ruled by the most oppressive HOA in the state, led by a woman who made dictators look chill. Trouble hit the moment we arrived. I was unpacking when a crisp knock interrupted. There stood Pamela Reed, HOA president, with a flawless brunette bob, pricey sunglasses, and a smile as fake as her tan. "Welcome to Cedar Ridge," she chirped, handing me a binder thick enough to double as a dumbbell. "I'm Pamela, and this is our community handbook. Sign for receipt within 48 hours. Inspections start immediately. We're very serious about property values." Her eyes scanned our yard like a hawk. "Henry's been lax lately. I'm sure you'll whip him into shape. Dues are due the first, $50 late fee. Have a fabulous day." She strutted off in her stilettos, leaving me stunned, clutching a 70-page rulebook dictating everything from mailbox colors to the exact timing of trash can placement. Inside, Henry leaned against the wall, smirking. "Met the queen, huh? Don't sweat, it's all hot air." I wished he was right, but Pamela was a storm, and her enforcer, Gary Holt, was her lightning bolt. That afternoon, as Ethan and I unpacked, I spotted a burly guy in a polo marked HOA security snapping photos of our lawn. I approached to introduce myself, but he barely glanced up, shoving a neon orange violation notice at me. "Grass over 3 inches, violates Covenant 7, paragraph 3, he said, his tone dripping with glee. "First offense, warning. Next is $100. Fix it in 48 hours. I explained we'd just moved in, but Gary cut me off. "Rules are rules, ma'am. I enforce them, and I'll be back." His lingering stare as he photographed our yard from every angle gave me chills. I showed Henry the notice, expecting outrage, but he just chuckled. "Gary's been after me for years. Failed cop. Now he's Rambo with a clipboard." As a single mom scraping by, I couldn't afford fines. Henry patted my shoulder. "Relax, Sarah. I've lived here 30 years. I know how to play their game." His eyes had a mischievous glint I didn't yet understand. That night, I pored over the HOA rules, horrified by their pettiness. No visible hoses, holiday lights limited to 3 weeks. Even mailbox shades needed Pamela's approval. Henry sipped tea across from me, his grin cryptic. "I survived Korea and wired skyscrapers for 40 years. These clowns don't scare me." The next morning, he was in the yard with a ruler, measuring grass. "Their rule says grass can't top 3 inches, but doesn't specify what you grow," he said, winking. "Time to get creative." I met our neighbor, Leo Martinez, a tech analyst, while grabbing the mail. He rolled his eyes at Pamela and Gary's names. "They fined me $400 for a Puerto Rican flag on my porch aesthetic violation. I fought it, but they've targeted me since. Word is, Gary's Pamela's cousin, and fines pad his paycheck." That afternoon, Ellen Harper, a retired librarian and reluctant HOA board member, stopped by. "Pamela wasn't always this bad," she whispered over tea. "The 2008 crash wiped her out, and now she's obsessed with control. Be careful, Henry's been on her hit list." True to his word, Gary returned 48 hours later. We'd mowed the lawn to 2.75 inches, but he cited us for uneven shrub pruning, $50 fine. Henry accepted the notice with mock courtesy, leaving Gary visibly annoyed by the lack of fight. "We'll be the most compliant residents ever," Henry told me, his tone laced with sarcasm. That night, he unveiled his plan, malicious compliance. Spreadsheets listed foul-smelling, Ugly plants legal under HOA rules and designs for garish but compliant yard signs like under surveillance and proximity alarm armed. We'll follow every rule, he said, but drive them nuts doing it. Henry installed 4 glaring security cameras, all HOA approved but impossible to miss, and plastered the signs around our property. Pamela stood across the street, fuming into her phone. She'll call a meeting, Henry predicted. That's what we want. He showed me a site for exotic plants. Ethan wants to study weird flora for science class. Let's help him out. I laughed at the list. Corpse flowers, stinking nettles, rancid garlic, all legal and revolting. Over 2 weeks, our yard became a botanical freak show. Ethan, thrilled, studied the plants with Henry, setting up lights for growth experiments that made our garden glow like a haunted swamp at night. Gary stalked our property, measuring frantically, but every plant and light met regulations. After his 3rd failed inspection, he snapped, "I'm on to you, Sullivan." Henry smiled sweetly. "Just gardening with my grandson, Gary. Educational stuff." Pamela called an emergency meeting to ban noxious or atypical plants. Ellen objected, noting the proposal's legal flimsiness, and it failed to pass. Meanwhile, Henry wired our property with hidden cameras, catching Gary sneaking around at midnight, peering over our fence with a ladder. "Trespassing," I said, alarmed. Henry nodded. "Time for a security upgrade." He spent days in his workshop, rigging our fence with wires and a control panel. New signs screamed, "Warning, electric fence. High voltage shock." I panicked. "Is this legal?" Henry winked. "What's illegal is Gary creeping around at night." He called Ruben Torres, a real estate lawyer, to inspect. Ruben approved. The voltage was safe, signs were clear, and the system only zapped climbers. "You're covered, especially with Gary's trespassing on tape," he said, warning me about Gary's history of targeting residents. That night, Henry showed me the setup. Pressure sensors triggered a livestock-grade shock, painful but harmless. At midnight, our cameras caught Gary with a ladder and telephoto lens. "He didn't buy the signs," Henry said, settling into his chair. We watched Gary climb, ignoring the warnings, and lean over. The fence hummed. Gary jolted, his camera flying as he crashed to the ground. He groaned, alive but rattled. "Time for 911, Henry said, unfazed. Trespasser hurt himself on our marked fence. Police and paramedics arrived. Gary, dazed, claimed Henry assaulted him. Henry showed the footage. Gary trespassing at 1:30 a.m., ignoring signs. Sergeant Lopez raised an eyebrow. "Midnight inspections, huh? You're lucky they're not pressing charges." At the hospital, a nurse recognized Gary from past mishaps, falling off ladders, bitten by dogs, always at odd hours. Pamela stormed in, disheveled in pajamas. "You electrocuted my cousin," she shrieked. Henry calmly cited the footage and police report. Her threats of connections fell flat. Back home, Henry met with Ellen and Leo, plotting what he called the Cedar Ridge Uprising. Ellen had years of notes on Pamela's abuses, arbitrary fines, skewed enforcement. Leo documented racial bias and citations. Henry's spreadsheets tied fines to Gary's pay hikes. Gary's zap became the spark to ignite the neighborhood. Gossip spread, exaggerating the tale, but it broke the HOA's grip. Residents shared stories, signing Ellen's petition for a new board. Pamela fought back with $700 retroactive fines for our hazardous fence and new rules banning electric fences. Ruben laughed them off. Retroactive penalties were unenforceable. Henry demanded HOA financial records, uncovering vague security expenses funneled to Gary's shell company. Ellen called an emergency meeting, bypassing Pamela, with 50% resident signatures. At the PAC Community Center, Pamela tried to hijack the meeting, threatening defamation lawsuits. Ellen invoked bylaws, naming Henry chair as the senior non-board homeowner. Henry dismantled Pamela's reign, revealing $60,000 yearly payments to Gary's firm without bids. Residents erupted, sharing grievances. Ellen's no-confidence vote passed overwhelmingly, electing her, Leo, and a CPA, Linda Wong, as interim board. Pamela and Gary stormed out, vowing lawsuits. A week later, a $500,000 suit arrived, claiming emotional distress and defamation. Henry grinned. "Perfect. They walked into my trap." He documented every HOA move for years, building legal allies. Discovery exposed Gary's shady past fired for brutality, restraining orders and Pamela's scheme to siphon HOA funds for her vacation home. In court, Judge Alvarez saw through their flimsy claims. Our evidence footage, finances, resident testimonies crushed them. This is harassment via lawsuit, she snapped, dismissing the case and referring Pamela to the DA for fraud. Pamela fled Oregon, facing charges. Gary took a plea: trespassing, harassment, and a ban from HOA work. The old board quit, and Ellen's team rewrote fair bylaws. Ethan's potato zapping experiment won a science fair, and our yard became a quirky landmark. Ruben launched an HOA legal clinic, Ellen taught governance, and Leo built transparent HOA software. My writing career took off with a book on Henry's victory. Each year, we host a barbecue on Zap Night. Henry retells Gary's tumble, ending, "The real shock was this neighborhood standing up." Cedar Ridge now feels like a community, not a prison. Sometimes, justice needs just the right jolt.